generosity to Newhouse and to its advertising department. Thank you, Eric. Every distinguished speaker in the history of this speaker series, the CEOs, the creative directors, the marketing mavens who have lit up this auditorium over the past few years, all owe some measure of their fame and reputation to tonight's speaker. He is Rance Crane, the editor-in-chief of Advertising Age and a member of its founding family. Every advertising person remembers the first time their name appeared in Advertising Age. It was proof that you were in the business and might even make your mark on it someday. Rance Crane and the magazine he has served for over 50 years certainly made its mark on the business. Ad Age has been the ad game's publication of record since 1930. And as Rance knows, there are precious few magazines that celebrate their 85th birthday. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Long before TV, there was Ad Age, covering the business with a sober and journalistic eye. Advertising Age is, of course, only one page in the Crane family's portfolio. Like the names Luce and Hearst, the name Crane owns a permanent place in magazine publishing history. Crane's New York business, Crane's Chicago business, Crane's Detroit business, pensions and investments, automotive news, Auto Week, modern healthcare, plastic news, and charmingly enough, plastic news China. Yeah. Well done. Our guest tonight founded many of those titles, and as president and editorial director of Crane Communications still guides them. Rance Crane is a graduate of Northwestern's Medill School of Journalism and a member of Medill's Hall of Achievement. He is a member of multiple Halls of Fame, the AF Hall of Achievement and the Direct Marketing Hall of Fame. Most important, he is in our hall tonight. Rance, thank you for coming. Please give him a big welcome. Well, thank you for coming.
Well, thanks, you guys, for sticking around. I really appreciate it. Above and beyond the call of duty. So I'm just going to talk about our company. We're celebrating our 100th anniversary this year. And I want to also talk about some of the lessons that we've learned in our 100 years that might very well apply to many of you. So as our company, Crane Communications, celebrates its 100th anniversary, I think it's important for us to remember how we got where we are and what we need to do to prepare for the next 100 years. We need, in short, to reinforce and embrace the entrepreneurial spirit that helped us build some of the strongest brands in business publishing. Advertising Age, Automotive News, Crane Chicago Business, Pensions and Investments, Modern Healthcare, Plastics News, Business Insurance, and Investment News, to name a few. Now, since I was involved in a half dozen of our startups and have been around the company for over half its lifetime, yikes, I'm in a pretty good position to give you the inside story of how we did what we did. And the main point I want to make this evening is that every company should embody an entrepreneurial spirit. And since all companies start out small, it can be very instructive to go back to the beginning to rediscover what attributes the founder brought to the table. I'm also going to give you the top 10 rules of successful entrepreneurship gleaned from our years of trying to figure it all out. Our company was started by my father, G.D. Crane Jr., in 1916. He was a newspaperman in Louisville, Kentucky, before he started his own business writing news service, in which he and a couple of other journalists served as Louisville stringer for over 100 different trade papers. One of the papers Dad wrote for was the National Underwriter, a highly successful publication serving insurance agents and brokers. And Dad thought how unfair it was that corporate buyers of insurance didn't have a publication of their own. And he kept that idea on ice for 50 years before he decided to start it. So the first rule of the successful entrepreneur is timing. When Dad thought of the insurance paper, which was launched as business insurance in 1967, there probably weren't many companies that even had a corporate insurance manager. He had to wait for the market to develop before he made his move. Of course, he had other diversions along the way. My dad always wanted to be a publisher, and one of the things I'm most glad I did in my life is have a series of tape-recorded interviews with him on his recollections and experiences building his company. Actually, the recollections start when he was a young boy. Because money was a very scarce commodity in his family in those days, Dad started his business career buying newspapers from the offices of the Louisville Times for 1 cent each, then reselling them for 2 cents. His first day on the job, he bought 5 newspapers for a nickel and returned home a couple of hours later with a 100% increase in his capital. Dad's first publication was in the hospital field, because there was only one important publication in the field at that time, Modern Hospital. But where Modern Hospital emphasized hospital design and construction, Dad's idea for his publication, Hospital Management, was to devote content to hospital administration, stressing the practice of the practical work of superintendents and department heads. That was Dad's great insight. His ability to stake out a position that was unserved by other publications. And that would be his modus operandi throughout his career, as we shall see. And that's successful entrepreneur rule number 2. Have a distinct point of view so that your product stands out from all the rest. I think it's true in advertising, too, and I write about the subject often in my column in Advertising Age. Now, hospital management got a good reception among readers, but advertising was slow to develop, partly because there weren't many places to promote it. So Dad figured that a publication covering specialized as opposed to consumer advertising would be an ideal place to promote hospital management as well as other business papers. The readers were business-to-business marketers and their ad agencies. Both Hospital Management and Class, Dad's B2B publication, were making money, and by the late 20s, he started thinking about new worlds to conquer. He set his sights on competing against Printers, Inc., one of the great trade papers of the time devoted to how to do better advertising. Dad's idea was to report the news of the advertising business, account changes and new ad campaigns and personnel moves. While Printers, Inc. went to press in the middle of the week, Advertising Age would close on Friday so it could carry all the news of the week. As Dad said, the news of advertising at the time we entered the field in 1930 was a completely unknown area. Nobody was reporting news. There were no newspaper advertising columns. There were no regional publications, and advertising news was simply not being reported anywhere. And when we started, we began turning up information that nobody else had, and people were delighted to get. Today, we still dig up news that nobody has, but we break it on our website. The printed publication plays a different role these days, and our stories are enhanced by reader reaction to our website offerings. I'll talk a little later about how investment news uses such reader input from Twitter, blogs, and our own website to forward the story in print. Successful entrepreneurial rule number 3 is enthusiasm. When my dad started Ad Age in 1930, it was in the beginning stages of the Great Depression. Only he didn't know it was the beginning stages. He was forced to fold Class into Ad Age, and he had to endure 3 years of losses from all his publications. He said there was no indication at the time that a business depression of long duration was in prospect. As a matter of fact, my dad said, at that particular time I was president of the National Conference of Business Paper Editors, and we were meeting regularly with President Hoover and his cabinet to discuss business conditions. We were assured by these authorities that prosperity was just around the corner and that the depression would not last very long. However, Dad said, I think I would have gone ahead anyway because I had gotten enthusiastic about the idea. And enthusiasm is a contagious thing. When Dad would go out on sales calls, he would talk about the great reaction Advertising Age was having with readers. And the clients would say, "You really believe all this stuff, don't you?" And my dad would say, "Yeah, it's great." They told him they didn't have any money at the time for promotion, but when they did, they'd be with us, and they were. And so there's successful entrepreneurial rule number 4. Be lucky, or at least think you're lucky. In spite of all the problems Dad had keeping the wolves from his door, he thought his timing was fortunate. His timing in the Depression was fortunate. Looking back, he said, I have the feeling we might have been lucky in starting in the Depression, because if we had started under more favorable circumstances, it's quite possible other people would have been able to establish a publication with much better facilities than we were able to muster with our limited resources. So let's see, what rules for successful entrepreneurism do we have so far? We have timing, we have a distinct point of view, we have enthusiasm, and we have luck or perceived luck. Others that are equally important are flexibility, self-confidence, opportunism, hire nice people, and have fun. You'll see how all these attributes all played a big part in our growth. When I graduated from college in 1960, I headed straight to Washington, D.C. to work as a reporter in the Washington Bureau of Ad Age. A small, feisty, full of pep and enthusiasm, bespectacled guy by the name of Stan Cohen was my first boss and my best boss. Stan passed away in May of 2013 at the age of 93, and even though he had been retired for 25 years, his influence continued until the day he died and beyond. He ingrained in me that what's best for consumers is best for advertisers, and that's been our editorial position in all the intervening years. Stan taught me to believe in and defend my ideas just as he fiercely defended his during the rise of consumer protection in the 60s. Stan contended that advertisers, quote, defended a culture that assumed unsubstantiated claims and tricky production gimmicks were legitimate sales tools. And he wrote in his well-read column that advertisers needed to clean up their act or face harsh and restrictive legislation. So that's successful entrepreneurial rule number 5. Be confident in your own ideas. But I couldn't have done it without Stan. I guess I was successful entrepreneurial rule number 4 lucky, because until I read the book Advise and Consent, my senior year at Northwestern, I had no desire to work in Washington. So you could say, I guess, that one book changed my life. But I guess you could also say that if I hadn't been asked to give a speech in Houston, I never would have gotten the idea for Crane's Chicago business. And that changed the very nature of our company. But before we get to the Chicago startup, let's go to the Christmas holidays of 1966. I was a reporter for Ad Age in New York in those days, and I came back to Chicago to spend the holidays with my mom and dad. We were driving somewhere, and my dad asked me how I'd like to be editor of a new publication he was thinking about starting. I didn't know anything about insurance, but I thought it sounded like a good opportunity for advancements. So I quickly agreed. Besides, I was making $15,000 a year at the time, and my wife Marilee and I had just had a baby. So the extra money, I forgot to ask what the new job would pay, would come in handy. I remember spending the first day as editor of Business Insurance trying to figure out how to spell Marsh and McLennan, a major insurance broker. So I had a long way to go to bring myself up to speed on the insurance business. But one thing I knew, I didn't want our new paper to be a compilation of the arcane details and machinations of this very complex field. Insurance is a worldwide business, and I wanted to play off of the general news to zero in on the insurance aspects. So if there was a disaster anywhere in the world, our reporters would get the details of the insurance coverage. For our pilot issue, for instance, we did a story on the insurance for Expo 67, an international fair in Canada. And our lead story gave the employee benefit details of a new contract between the United Auto Workers and the car companies. The first person I hired was Robin Menz, later Robert Shabir. She was a reporter on the Newport News, Virginia Daily Press. And she said, the only thing that scared me was wondering about what this insurance stuff was all about, Robin remembered. As far as I knew, the only insurance which existed was car insurance. But I figured I would learn, and I was very relieved when I saw that Rance didn't know much more than me. Robin died at an early age of cancer after she left us to raise her family. One of the hardest lessons for a new editor to learn is not to expect your reporters to write stories the same way you did. I remember chastising one of our reporters in front of his colleagues, and I watched him turn bright red from embarrassment. I vowed that I would never put anyone in that position again, and I haven't. That's successful entrepreneur rule number 6. Treat your people with respect. They are the ones who are making you money. We had an amazing guy as ad director of business insurance who always came in on budget. When Al Malecki was given his job, Sid Bernstein, longtime president of our company, said, "Congratulations, Al. Now how many pages are you going to sell the first year?" That day, Al became a prophet because he said maybe 400, and he came in at 440. Al never missed a budget in his many years at business insurance, except in his last year on the job in 1991, when he was 50 pages over his ad page estimate. But we were willing to forgive that slight miscalculation. In 1971, Slocum Publishing Company decided to put automotive news up for sale. The bidding came down to us and Fairchild Publications, and we decided to up the ante another $50,000, and we got it. Dad would never have agreed to buy the publication if my brother Keith weren't a car nut. He was a drag racer and was always tinkering with cars. So Keith moved to Detroit even though he had never been there in his life. Automotive News was losing about $500,000 a year, and within 6 months the publication was breaking even. Today, over 40 years later, it's our biggest and most profitable publication. Keith quickly became a well-known personality in Detroit, and the guy that TV networks would call when they wanted astute analysis and a good quote. And he was plugged into the top brass at the car companies. For instance, when Henry Ford fired Lee Iacocca, Keith was the first outsider to find out about it. He called Iacocca at home, and his first words to him were, "Say it isn't so, Lee." We had a huge scoop, but Keith knew it wouldn't hold until Monday when we came out. It was Friday afternoon, so he called PR Newswire, and all the media was forced to quote our story. And that brings us to successful entrepreneur rule number 7. Be opportunistic. Dad didn't know anything about the auto business, but he knew Keith knew, and that was good enough for him. Pensions and Investments was started 2 years later as a spin-off from business insurance. We covered pensions and business insurance, but only from a benefits point of view, and I thought a new publication was needed to cover pensions from an investment viewpoint. P&I started as a biweekly, remains a biweekly 40 years later, and even though it's accumulated the second highest profits in our company. The game changer for our company in many ways was Crane Chicago Business. It changed our perception from a trade publisher to a broader business publications company. But I never would have gotten the idea if I hadn't given a speech to the ad club in Houston, Texas. Bob Gray was the publisher and founder of the Houston Business Journal, and after my speech, he offered to show me around his offices and tell me how he started his weekly newspaper. I liked the idea right away, and I remember thinking that if it worked in Houston, it would work twice as well in Chicago. The only difference was that his paper was mostly featured stories, and I thought our paper could break news by writing about smaller companies that the dailies would skip over or ignore. My mother, Gertrude Crane, had taken over as chairman of our company when my father died in 1973. So I used to give a speech about how I got approval for the idea to start a city business paper that went something like this. When I came up with the idea for Crane Chicago Business, I summoned up all my courage and walked right into the office of the chairman of the board and said, "I've got this great idea, Mom." Our family name was hardly a household word when we started our paper. We put our name on it only after another similar publication tried to beat us to the punch. In my column in the pilot issue, I quoted our managing editor, Dan Miller, on our dilemma. The main issue, he said, is the fight with the business community over recognition. No one knew us, and it was very difficult explaining who we were. They got us mixed up with Crane Plumbing. But we got on the map when we published a series of articles on Sears Roebuck's merchandising plans. If the store had only followed its own plans, it might not be in the mess it's in now. And Newsweek called us the cheeky new offspring of advertising age. In my 1977 memo to the board of directors about the proposed publication, I said I planned to spend $250,000 on the launch. 3 years later, and $3 million later, we broke into the black. One of the reasons for the extra cost was that we decided to go weekly instead of every other week when the Chicago Daily News folded in March of 1978, 3 months before our start. But another reason for the lousy budgeting was that advertising sales and paid circulation came in slower than we expected. I keenly remember Irv Kupcinet, the leading gossip columnist in Chicago, asking me when we were about 6 months into the game if rumors that we were going to fold the paper were true. Another time I talked to the guy who was running the newsstand at the train station, and he said something like, "I sure hope you don't have any of your own money tied up in the publication because it's going nowhere fast." But all of us remained optimistic. Successful entrepreneur rule number 8. Everywhere I'd go, people would say how much they enjoyed reading our new publication because they saw stories there that they didn't see anywhere else. As a matter of fact, when we first started, all our stories were exclusive, but we broadened our coverage when readers started asking us, "How are you going to treat that?" after a big merger or other important development. We realized that we were gaining readers' confidence because they wanted our take on the important local business news of the day. Since then, we've started similar publications in Cleveland, Detroit, and New York, and all 4 have carved out an important role in the marketplace. Back in the early 90s, on a trip to London, I came across a publication called Money Management, edited for investment advisors. I brought back some copies to give Bill Bison, publisher of P&I, and in 1996 we started Investment News to serve the growing investment advisory market in the U.S. It's been a big winner for us, doing well throughout the huge ad downturn of the Great Recession. In addition to its good financial showing, IN is one of our publications that has figured out how the internet can be used to enhance our printed product. The idea is to advance our web story by interacting with our internet viewers. So a breaking story might start out as a tweet by one of our reporters to get the news out as fast as possible. We might do a blog on the development to attract comments and further leads. Then after evaluating reader playback from Twitter and our blog, we'd run a Webby on the subject, a 600 or so word story appearing on our website that might be rewritten 2 or 3 times during the week to reflect additional information or developments. Our editor, Fred Gabriel, says 80% of what we write online appears in our print edition, greatly enhanced and augmented by reader comments. We do great print packages in investment news, and our challenge is to replicate that online. So we are working to improve our digital storytelling. It's my belief that video will be the best thing that came out of the internet. I said a few years ago, it's like we hit the jackpot and suddenly we've got the equivalent of a TV station for free. The problem is we print guys are often not particularly good at video programming, and it shows. But there are some great opportunities, and not necessarily in news where you'd think our sweet spot would be. We've had great success, for instance, with best practices articles in automotive news with auto dealers and investment news with investment advisors, and such packages on increasing sales, hiring and firing, on the other basics of running a business are even more compelling as video interviews. Here's another thought. Why don't we take an idea from the movie playbook by developing a secondary video market for our conferences and expos? The main reason for attending meetings and conferences is for networking with colleagues and customers and potential customers. So if we were to offer a video of our conferences edited down to an hour or so and released a month or more after the meeting, I don't think it would discourage people from attending, and we develop a whole new ancillary market. I can see the day when we'll have a Crane TV channel with videos from all our publications playing at specific times throughout the day and night. I used to give a talk to our people about the strengths and weaknesses of our company on how they often ended up being the same thing. One of the great strengths of our company is the independence of our publisher, I'd say. Then I'd add, one of the great weaknesses of our company is the independence of our publishers. By that I mean that we are missing a lot of opportunities by not working more closely together. And since that time, we have gradually started at least sharing success stories with each other and pushing our publishers to step up their game in such new revenue-producing areas as custom content. We're developing a customs product database to alert all publishers whenever a significant custom deal has been sold, with all the details. One of our big wins has been publishing the program for the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and we've recently taken on Chevrolet's magazine for its owners. In the broader picture, we need to know when any customer makes a transaction anywhere in the company. So we are developing a CRM system that will allow us to become less dependent on traditional marketing partners. Chris Crane, my nephew, is spearheading the CRM project for us. And as he pointed out, our company has 6 million registered users, thanks to all our new digital platforms, but only 13% are paid subscribers. So converting those 6 million registered users to paid customers is a major initiative of ours. Creating a unified database will give us a single profile view of our registered users. We will know, for instance, how long they have been a customer, what products they use, what information they're interested in, what their role is in their organization, and much more other useful data. We'll be able to analyze reading patterns to alert our audience to white papers or seminars on the subject, or even to suggest to editors the topic has broad enough appeal to support an e-newsletter. And of course, to cross-sell our audience to other relevant products and services we offer. But you know, having this treasure trove of data doesn't mean much if we're not nimble enough to act quickly and smart enough to develop products and services our audience wants and needs. We've always believed that our job is to serve a reader need that is unique to us. Because there's no assurance that customers will buy your product if it's no different than other similar products, they have also found the right prospects via a CRM program or any other means. It isn't and never will be the last click that sells the merchandise. It's all the other impressions of what distinguishes your product or service that results in the final sale. This basic premise, it's the product, stupid, is not widely accepted, especially in consumer marketing circles these days. Can the product still be the hero in these transformational times? The digital age has raised the hope that we can come closer to predicting not only when our audience is ready to buy, but also the putting the offer in front of it that will trigger the click that closes the deal. Just before he turned 90, I had the great privilege of interviewing Lester Wunderman, the founder of direct marketing, and he revealed to me the great mystery of advertising. Lester said, to hit the target at the right moment is the win, and it's the one thing we don't know. As I have said to consumer marketing audiences, my fear is that we'll never know. Today's technology allows us to track the buying preferences of consumers to deliver relevant advertising. And I believe that consumers and our audience, for that matter, welcome ads and offers for products that they like and enjoy, as opposed to products that they have no interest in. But I also acknowledge that consumers are getting increasingly skittish about the possibility of cyber stalking, real or imagined. That, together with the fact that all this data is being lumped together and reconfigured for totally other purposes, causes me to wonder whether the win moment of consumer buying or audience development can ever be achieved. Big data, it must be admitted, has many conflicting masters. Big data and entrepreneurship don't seem, at least on the surface, to go hand in hand. And it's important to remember that individual judgment about new initiatives and also the people who lead them is the key to any successful enterprise. My dad's biggest contribution was enthusiasm, and he was able to inspire our own people, our readers, and our customers for the tough times he faced. My mom, who served as chairman of our company for 25 years after Dad passed away, made the love and caring for our people the centerpiece of her career. Mom would laugh with our employees, she'd cry with them, and she'd celebrate the milestones of their lives with them. She kept our growing company a real family company, and she truly thought of our people as part of her extended family. She made sure our company was a nice place to work, successful entrepreneurial rule number 9, and people were appreciated, number 10, and had fun. So that's the story of our almost 100 years in our 100 years in the publishing business, and how we tried to keep the entrepreneurial flame burning brightly. So let me recap the rules of the successful entrepreneur. 1, timing. Know when the time is ripe and also unripe when you launch a new product or service. 2, have a distinct point of view. Don't just copy the other guy's product. 3, enthusiasm. If you're convinced you're going to be successful, chances are others will share your view. 4, be lucky. Find a way to make lemonade out of lemons. 5, be confident in your own ideas, and that means testing them to see if you can defend them. 6, treat your people with respect. Nobody has the right to make people feel bad about themselves. 7, be opportunistic. It might not be your normal pattern, but make it work anyway if it's a good idea. 8, be optimistic. Don't let a few naysayers throw cold water on a hot idea. 9, make your place a nice place to work, and your good people will stay forever. And 10, have fun. What's the point of all the hard work? And if you're having fun, so will all your people, and what a great place to work that will be. I would put enthusiasm and caring about your people at the top of the list of any successful entrepreneur. It's all about creating an environment of confidence. Confidence that your company will succeed, and confidence that your people know your respect and trust their efforts to succeed. These are the rules of the successful entrepreneur that mattered most to us down through the years. And these are our guidelines and guideposts as we head into the next 100. Thank you very much. I'd be very happy to answer any questions anybody might have. Yes?
Thank you, Rance, very much for being here, and thank you for your service to the industry. I know that you've seen a great deal of change in the advertising industry over the years that you've been involved with Ad Age and other publications that sell advertising. But as we look at all that change, and as you've looked at all that change, what have you seen that hasn't changed in our industry?
Oh, that's a good question. I think what we've seen is that companies and agencies and everybody are still trying to find ways to get the customer excited. And that is becoming a more and more difficult job. You know, I think that the anger that we've seen on the political side is manifesting itself also in the consumer side, because a lot of great brands are no longer producing the kind of sales they once produced. And it's harder for advertisers to reach them in a meaningful way to get meaningful results. And I think that consumers are more skeptical than they've ever been before. And I think, didn't we see this reflected in the Super Bowl this year? The commercials were not celebrating things as much. They weren't as funny. They weren't as sure-footed, I think. And I think that things have gotten a lot more tentative as things have gotten more tentative throughout the world. And so I think this is one of the things that advertisers and agencies are going to have to grapple with, and I'm not sure they've figured it out, especially since the client-agency relationship seems to be on more, shall I say, more in a more delicate way than it's ever been before. You've probably been reading that the agencies, the Association of National Advertisers and the 4As, the agency groups, have been feuding, for lack of a better word, because of allegations that there might be rebates and kickbacks going on in the business. And the ANA went so far as to apologize for one of its speakers saying that rebates were rampant in the business. And it amazed me that the ANA sort of had to back down a little bit and say, well, we didn't mean to draw the conclusion that all agencies are involved in this and we don't know how widespread it is, blah, blah, blah. But they had knew what the guy was going to say when he said it, and they rehearsed it before, so they were very well aware of it. And then, to keep the feud going, the agencies came out prematurely with their own set of transparent principles on how agency-client relationships can work. And the ANA didn't like that at all because they jumped the gun and they did it before the agencies were, before the advertisers were ready to agree to any such principles. And some of the principles that the agencies espoused were that, well, it's okay for the client and the agency to have direct relations, but other things the agency might do in the way of other activities is none of the advertiser's business. So stay out of it. And one of the reasons for this animosity is simply because agencies are having a tough time making a buck now. Advertisers are very adamant about keeping their fees under control and are beating them down. So a lot of advertisers sort of look the other way when they might get some rebates and say, well, that enables us not to have to pay as much money to our agencies.
We have a class? I have a class here, Rance.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry that I have to pull them out. So for those who are in my class, let's head upstairs because I have 1 hour to get them through an exercise. So
Well, thanks very much.
Thank you very much for your,
Thank you very
for your
much.
insights. And it's an entrepreneurship class, so we got to get
Oh, great, okay.
we got
All
to
right.
take over your universe. That's what we're doing.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Go. Okay, one question, short answer, quick question.
I was just wondering, you've spoken about a lot of magazines and newspapers that are very tailored to a specific industry, but in today's age of globalization and connectivity between different industries, do you think it's becoming more or less important for industries to have their individual publishing, or how do you see that developing?
No, I think it's still very important because each industry needs its own specific information. And you can read the Wall Street Journal, which is a great, great newspaper, but they can't go into all the details that somebody might like to read on their particular industry. So I think trade papers are needed as much as ever. It's just going to be in different forms now. Whether they do it in print or not, I don't know, but they can certainly, it's important to provide the information one way or the other.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we end the session, would you guys please, give a round of applause to Professor Russell, who's right behind us. And the very last one is, I have a special gift for Mr. Crane.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you for coming, and thanks for the patience. And our next speaker will be February 29th.
Left the letter in the car. You did not. We were gonna go. Well, I thought we were going out.
So, yeah,